This summer, Johnsonville reminds everyone to get their sausage family together to enjoy some plump, juicy brats around the grill. Because at Johnsonville, we don't make sausage, we make family and sausage.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNradio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Golic. Thanks for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Here's what we got for you from Tuesday. Warriors lose, but everyone's talking about Curry's fall. We get into that and much more with Jeff Van Gundy, Louis Riddick, and Sarah Spain on Ray McDonald being released.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Back and better than ever, Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests, as always, on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. I look to my left and I cannot see Patriot Ray. You know, when I had Jamel Hill here, I could see Patriot Ray. Yeah. When I had Buster Olney, I could see all of Patriot Ray. Mm-hmm. When I had Stu Gotts yesterday, my goodness, I could see for miles. That man is diminutive.
Is he more diminutive than Buster?
He gives Buster a run for his money. That's correct. The two of them on each other's shoulders don't add up to the big fella, Mike Golic, who was back and better than ever from his travels to Arizona. You were out there. You had fun. I saw your daughter tweeting about your exploits.
Had a ball. Sydney was out there, me and Chris, and my mom and her mom. We had the moms out there. Nice trip. I had some bison burgers, you know, and who wouldn't?
Well, of course.
Of course you wouldn't have some bison burgers. I had a great time. Almost didn't come back, quite honestly.
I noticed there was one tweet from your daughter who said, my parents and my grandmas have been at the casino, and I've been in bed for 6 hours.
Yes.
So, obviously, this was like a role reversal, I would say.
Yeah. We you know, listen, Chris and I, we went to the casinos with the moms, and we were ready to leave, and they weren't.
Those moms will get it going.
I'm going to tell you what.
Right? The grandmas will get it revved up.
They're either at the regular slots or they're at the bar slots, you know, where they're slamming them back while they're playing slots. I mean, Ma, you ready to go? She's 84 years old and she ain't ready to go.
No, kidding me? She's out there. She's going to play her slot machine.
Woo.
You hang out. You find some ways to have some fun. I'm glad you guys had a nice time out there in Arizona. You spent a lot of time, from what I could tell, watching lacrosse.
Yes, we did. Oh, my God. I mean, listen, we got a lot to talk about, but you got to give it up to Denver, who won the national championship. They played Notre Dame Saturday in what turned out to be an overtime game that Denver won. It was a great game, great ending, and then Denver took care of Maryland yesterday, 10-5. Congrats to them. First team outside the Eastern time zone. Lacrosse really been an East Coast sport. Now, Notre Dame kind of jumped in the fray coming from the Midwest and kind of having a whole lot of success, and then Denver, the first team outside the Eastern time zone to win a national title. So congrats to them. They deserved it. They played extremely well.
The growth of that sport is an interesting one. It's certainly in the area in the country in which we live, and I just have seen this with my own kids, more and more kids playing it.
They really are. You know, so some are doing it instead of baseball. Some are doing it in conjunction with baseball. The same seasons going on, especially Little League. My kids who played baseball, Mike and Jake, put down the bats and never picked them up again when we moved here and started playing lacrosse. So it is starting to spread more to the Midwest and to the West, but still dominated here on the East Coast.
All right. Speaking of the West, we had the West Conference Finals Game 4 last night, and it was Golden State going for the sweep. It didn't go that way. Let's start off the top with that. Some music there, Bubba. We'll go through the big events of last night, including Mike James Harden, who was not going to let his team go down. Scored a career playoff high 45 as the Rockets stay alive.
Yep, according to Elias, that's the third highest point total in NBA history by a player whose team was playing to avoid being swept in the best-of-7 series.
And it was really last night
Off the top.
just a barrage of three-point attempts from both teams. You know the Warriors like to hoist them up. You know the Rockets took more threes this season than any team in NBA history. Put it all together, and they broke a record last night.
Yeah, they certainly did. Their 37 made three-pointers between the two shattered the record of 33 set by the Rockets and Sonics back in the 96 conference semifinals. The team scored 45, almost 46% of their combined 243 points from behind the arc. And that's how this game started out. Houston just could not miss from three-point land.
Yeah, Harden got hot early. The Warriors, you know they're going to make theirs. Klay Thompson finally woke up a little, making some of his threes. So that's what it is. And again, it continues the conversation we've been having with Phil Jackson and everything else over the course of the last few days over whether this is a blip on the radar or this is the way it's all going to go. Meanwhile, speaking of the way it's all going to go, off the top with Mike and Mike, they went to overtime again last night in Anaheim, and here's how it ended.
To Bickle at center, a shot blocked to the Anaheim line, played ahead. Kessler moving in, shoots, save, rebound, score! Anaheim gets the game-winning goal!
And that's how it went, Mike, and they had just barely gotten started in overtime. The Beast 980 with the play-by-play.
So let's go a couple of ways here. Jonathan Toews for Chicago became the first player in 19 years to score a pair of goals with an extra attacker on the ice, but then Matt Bolesky countered with the fastest overtime goal in Ducks history, according to Elias, the Game 5 winner in a best-of-7 series that was tied 2-2, now 3-2. When you get that third win on a 2-2 tie, 79% of the time you go on to win. But Toews, 2 minutes ago, they're down 2. He scores 1. The second goal he scored with seconds left defied angles, quite honestly, on the shot that he made that ended up going off the goalie in his leg and in. It was incredible. But then Bolesky, they get a 2-on-1, and he gets the rebound, gets it in 45 seconds into overtime, and that's all she wrote for Chicago.
So the Ducks are up 3-2, and the Lightning up 3-2 in the respective conference finals in the Stanley Cup. Cavaliers will look to sweep Atlanta tonight, make the NBA Finals for the first time since 2007. No coincidence. LeBron James was a Cav then, and he's a Cav now.
Yep, and if the Cavs win and they get to the finals, LeBron James will become the first player not from the 1960s Celtics dynasty to reach the NBA Finals in 5 consecutive seasons.
We actually went through this yesterday. There were 8 players on those teams who made 5 consecutive finals. They are the only 8 players in NBA history to make 5 consecutive finals. The list of players to make the finals 5 straight years in any sport is extremely slim. We did a partial list. It's an incomplete list.
Right.
Yesterday, a lot of the New York Islanders, because they made 5 in a row.
Okay.
The Yankees won 5 in a row from 49 to 53. But it is a very, very small list. And LeBron James will be adding his name to
Off
it.
the top.
And then finally, speaking of small lists, Alex Rodriguez is tied for 4th on the list of all-time RBIs with Babe Ruth. And with just 1 or 2 hot nights, he can move way up that list.
1 shy of 3rd place, which is Lou Gehrig, and 4 shy of 2nd place, which is Barry Bonds. What's interesting, the opposing pitcher today is Jason Vargas. Now, A-Rod has faced 363 different pitchers at least 10 times and is hitless against 7 of them, and Vargas is one of those. So he's faced him at least 10 times and is hitless against Vargas, but he's just, games away from being 2nd place all time.
But
on that
history
list
would suggest this isn't going to be that game. And that's Mac and Mike. And what's trending now is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. New improved taste, 10 great flavors. Have you tried 5-Hour Energy shots lately? Back to where that began, of course, which was the Rockets staying alive, but really the moment that everyone will remember from this game. Hold your breath and hide your eyes, everybody.
You can keep this pace up. It's questionable.
Oh, look out. Smith passes inside. Curry goes off his feet and over the top of a man and falls hard on his backside, and Curry is down on the in line. Curry went into the air trying to defend a pass inside and got the shoulders, I believe, of Josh Smith and tumbled over Smith and onto the floor.
Well, it was a scary moment for sure, and I'm sure that we'll show it to you here coming up with our simulcast on ESPN News. By the way, a reminder, we're on ESPN News for the most part this week with French Open tennis on ESPN2. But Steph Curry goes flying over Josh Smith in the air and comes down hard on the back of the neck. And in a postseason filled with one injury after another, one bad injury after another, one significant injury after another, this looked like it was on the verge of being the worst.
Well, it did. You go back to when John Wall broke the 5 bones in his hand, right? You go back to that, and remember he fell backwards. He fell backwards and landed kind of on his hand. And he had 5 breaks in his hand. So quite honestly, when I first saw the fall, Trevor Reeves has got the ball in the paint and he goes to a quick pump fake and Curry goes up right over the top of him, and you watch him land. At first he put out both hands. He landed on his left hand and then his right shoulder and his head. So I thought, one of 3 things. First I saw the hand. I thought, did he bust something in the hand or the wrist? Then he landed hard on his shoulder and hit his head. So you start thinking about the soreness in the shoulder, and then certainly you knew he was going to go through a concussion protocol because his head hit the ground. He just rolled over on his stomach and laid there for a while. The way the game was going then, the way they were getting destroyed, I thought, no way is he going to come back. But it turns out, it was a 20-some point lead up to 25, 10-point lead at half. And then, he does come back into the game, scores 23 in the game. And they do get it down to 6, which we'll get into in the 4th quarter. But I was somewhat surprised he came back, and I was more interested to hear what he actually hurt. Was it the wrist? Was it the shoulder? Now, he reached for his head right away with his right arm. So these are the things I'm watching for, right?
Sure.
Because he landed on his right shoulder, but when he got up, he put his right hand up on his head. So I thought, okay, his shoulder right now might not be too bad because he can get his hand up like that. He never reached for his wrist one time as he got up. So I thought, okay, maybe he's fine there. And obviously he was fine in both those situations. He went through the concussion protocol. And they said determined he was fine. I'm sure we'll go back and forth, and a lot of people did on should he have gone back in the game or not. But that was one play, as I was tweeting out, one play that could have changed the entire course, as we have talked about an NBA playoffs, which had been pretty darn good up to these conference championships. They've been awful. But all the injuries that we talked about, we're rattling off names of players who got hurt. This would have been, outside of LeBron James, the biggest injury out there had this been anything serious.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It was as close as we've gotten to basketball history being rewritten directly in front of our eyes. Because here's a Golden State team that is playing for some degree of immortality based upon the number of games they won this season, the chance of winning a championship, and the chance of potentially being a team that set a new trend, charted a new course. You know, is this going to be the new way that basketball is being played? Obviously, we don't know. Phil Jackson is a skeptic. There are others. But it certainly could be the team. We look back on this. I remember Golden State, Mike, in those mid-2000 teens, whatever we're ultimately going to call this decade. That was the team that kind of started it all. That could be the way we remember this. Well, Steph Curry goes down. Look, they're still a good team. And we talked about this yesterday. If you took LeBron James off the Cavs as currently constituted, meaning without Kyrie and without Kevin Love, and you took Steph Curry off of the Warriors and had them play each other in the finals,
Warriors without
Golden State would beat them 99 out of 100 times.
Agreed.
But if LeBron James is playing and you take Steph Curry off the Warriors, then that changes it completely. He is the engine that makes that whole thing run. So there's one very scary moment last night.
Yeah, it was, but it turns out he went through the concussion protocol and was fine and went back in the game. And there were people that are saying, why did he go back in the game? And quite honestly, if you pass the concussion protocol, and I think you ask any athlete this, if they feel fine, they pass the concussion protocol, there's not even a thought about them not going back in the game. But you have maybe a sprained wrist or a sprained shoulder, there's a little more thought. You know what? It may not make sense to people because so much is put on the head injuries nowadays, but you've heard football players say time and time again, I'd rather get hit in the head than hit the knee. These guys, if they feel fine head-wise and they pass that concussion test, it's not even a question. They want to get back into play.
Jalen Rose.
I was thinking the exact same way, but you can't give away games. Now all of a sudden James Harden throws up 45 points. You go back to Golden State. That becomes almost a must-win game for playing against a team that just came back from a 3-1 deficit facing the Los Angeles Clippers.
So Jalen saying he was thinking about maybe keeping him out of the game. Here's the thing. It does set itself up. I understand that. You're right. If he's fine, then why not put him back out there? They did almost shoot their way back into that game.
Right.
And the reality is, the longer you leave Houston in it, let's put it this way. Houston winning one game is no big deal. I picked Golden State in 5 before it began. I think if you reverse the order, if Houston had won game 3 and Golden State had won last night, we'd be saying the series is over.
Yeah.
If Houston should find a way, and I don't expect them to, but if Houston should find a way to steal game 5, then it would completely change the dynamic, right? Because all of a sudden they're going home. We start talking about everything they did coming back against the Clippers. You set up a winner-take-all game 7 in which Golden State could be on the threshold of being the first team ever to blow a 3-0 lead. Now you get really scary time for the Warriors. So I understand not wanting to give the team life. I have no problem with them putting him back in the game.
I don't either. Again, it wasn't any kind of injury. This is just from the athlete's thought process, not like a joint or a ligament or something like that, where you can go back on the court and hurt it more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just the thought process. Okay, I can't go hurt that more. The head is fine. I'm going back on the court. And, oh, by the way, it's a 20-some game after the first quarter, 10 points at halftime, and he comes back in the third quarter. They had shot themselves back into the game certainly by the fourth midway through, and they were only down 6. So they had their chances, but James Harden and the Rockets were just too hot at that point. So I really don't have a problem. Now, if they were still down, I don't know, Hembo, exactly what they were down when he came back in the game, but I know it wasn't 25 anymore in the third quarter. If they were still down 20 at that point, maybe you say, all right, and I know you can go back in. There's really no need. We'll see what we can do here, but we'll let you sit. But I believe it was closer than that. So they took a shot. I don't have an issue with that at all.
No, and it's totally different from the Kyrie Irving situation. I was tweeting over the weekend there is no reason in the world I would put Kyrie Irving back on the floor in this series for Cleveland.
None, because you could further that injury. I mean, you could have him out for a longer time. They're two completely different things.
Yeah, and in that case, I think it's more a question of the rest is the only conceivable chance you have of him regaining some percentage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. Realistically speaking, with tendonitis, you tell me, does 2 weeks make that much of a difference?
Well, listen,
it can't hurt.
Anything like exactly right. Is it going to make you 100%? Absolutely not. Is it going to get you to better than where you are now? Absolutely. Right. So it's just a matter of what degree. So completely agree on that one to sit here.
Meanwhile, Steve Kerr says last night's game was over in the first quarter.
They've made everything. They won the game in the first quarter. They were ready to play, probably more ready than we were. We were on our heels. They were making shots from all over. They were obviously coming out with some fire and played extremely well. And tough to come back from 23 down after one quarter.
45 points for the Rockets in the first quarter.
Josh Smith I think he had a superpower last night of being invisible because when they went up 12-0, he took 2 of the threes where he actually stood there and basically posed the first shot of the game, and then another run along in that first 12 points where they basically just left him. He just stood outside the three. He could have posed. He could have done whatever he wanted. Nobody even looked at him, and he drained a couple of threes as they jumped out to that early lead, and never really. While Golden State got close, kudos to Houston for hanging on to that after that debacle in Game 3 when they just got absolutely run out of the gym. So this would have been unbelievable had Golden State made the comeback all the way back, but Houston just could not miss. And as we said earlier, 78 3-point attempts in this game, 46 by Golden State, 32 by Houston, and Houston just couldn't miss it, shooting 53% from 3-point land. You're not going to lose much. You do that.
No, they shot 17 of 32 from 3. They shot almost 57% for the game. By the way, when Steph came back in the game, it was basically midway through the third, 5:58 of the third. It was a 9-point game.
Okay.
So they were very much back in the game by that point was Golden State. And so there you have it. They try. They don't get all the way back. So at least we will not have 2 sweeps. Let's see if we will even have 1. We'll find out tonight. ESPN Radio, of course, your place for coverage of all of the remaining basketball games, both conference finals and the NBA finals. Tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern time, Hawks and Cavaliers as Cleveland and the exhausted LeBron James go for the sweep.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Guys, when you buy your clothes at DXL, you look good. But you feel like a rock star. So if you want to look and feel like you'll find all the brands you love, waist size 38 and up, all in one awesome store. DXL, you're looking good. Right now, Harbor Bay tees are just $19.99 each when you buy 2 or more.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Interesting numbers coming out of yesterday. We start with the Rockets, who just refused to die. They become the second team in NBA history to win 4 straight elimination games by double digits in a single postseason. The other team to do that were the Lakers in 1970, who ultimately lost in 7 games of the NBA Finals to the Knicks. Houston, meanwhile, they outscored the Clippers by 46 points in the final 3 games of the Western Conference semis, where they came back and won, and they beat the Warriors by 13 last night. So again, second team ever to win 4 straight games facing elimination by double digits in the same postseason. On the other side of the draw, LeBron James is averaging basically 33 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists in this series against the Hawks. He is on pace to become the first player in NBA history to average 30, 10, and 10 in a single playoff series. First ever.
Yeah, not going to lie. He's going to get there, I think.
Oscar didn't do it. Jordan didn't do it. Bird, Magic, Kareem, none of them did it. With another win, as we mentioned yesterday, he also will become the first player in NBA history to play in 5 consecutive NBA Finals while doing it for more than one team. So LeBron James etching his name in a bunch of different places. I had a big question of the day yesterday that I want to ask you coming up a little bit later here on Mike and Mike. Meanwhile, how about the Ducks with their win last night over the Blackhawks? The 2015 Ducks joined the 1979 Rangers as the only teams in NHL history to start the playoffs by playing 14 games without losing a one of them in regulation. No team, by the way, has ever gone 15. without losing a regulation game. Anaheim has 3 losses in this postseason, all of them in overtime.
Wow.
So they have not lost a game in regulation time in this entire postseason, 14 games.
Well, that's impressive.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, and they ended the one last night in 45 seconds into the first overtime.
And move 1 game away from a cup final. And then finally, think you're having a tough day? How'd you like to be Jeremy Guthrie of the Royals? In yesterday's loss to the Yankees, according to Elias, he became the first pitcher in baseball history to pitch 1 or fewer innings, allowing 11 earned runs and 4 homers. 1 or fewer innings pitched, 11 earned runs, and 4 home runs. First pitcher in baseball history. And as a result, his ERA went from 4.75 to 6.70, which is the highest mark of any qualified starter this season.
What do you think you'd say in your post-game, to the media?
I remember one time Charlie Huff was pitching a game for the White Sox when I was covering the game, and he got knocked out in the first inning and was just getting destroyed. And the manager, I think the manager was Jeff Torborg. I don't remember for sure, but whatever it was, we went into the clubhouse afterward and asked Charlie Huff, when he came out to take the ball, what did you say to him? And Charlie Huff said, goodbye. Yeah. There was nothing else to be said.
At that point, you might as well use a little bit of humor.
Charlie Huff was 50 at the time. Exactly. And those are our nerd notes here with us on Mike and Mike. One more note on Harden, by the way, because we have to give someone protecting the lead. Harden went nuts in that fourth quarter. He was still hitting threes right to the very end when Golden State cut back into that thing. That was a 23-point game in the first quarter. And Golden State cut it to 6 and had real chances. And James Harden was a big part of the reason that the Rockets were able to hold them off last night. So we'll give James Harden protecting the lead, which is brought to you by Protection One. Bring the best defensive player to your home or business. With Protection One, it's who we choose.
Needed the most in that second half. He had 33 of his 45 points in the second half. And after that huge lead, when Golden State got it to 6, I said, you've got to be kidding me if it were to end this way and Golden State to come back and win that one. But they didn't, and Houston forces it. Again, no one's ever come back from that down 3-zip, so I don't expect Houston to at all, but they did prolong the series a bit.
Okay, now to the NFL, and what was obviously the most significant in the big picture story of the sports day yesterday. The Bears have released defensive end Ray McDonald after his arrest on domestic violence and child endangerment charges. Police say the incident occurred at 3:48 a.m. Monday when McDonald is alleged to have physically assaulted a woman while she was holding a baby. Police said McDonald was arrested at 7 a.m. local time in San Jose on a charge of domestic violence and child endangerment. He was released late Monday on $15,000 bond. The address at which he was arrested, which is different from where the incident took place, belongs to his ex-49ers teammate Justin Smith, according to property records. The Bears general manager Ryan Pace said, quote, "We believe in second chances, but when we signed Ray, we were very clear what our expectations were if he was to remain a Bear. He was not able to meet the standard, and the decision was made to release him." Our Josina Anderson spoke on the phone with McDonald's attorney. His name is Steve DeFilippis. He confirmed that the accuser in the case is McDonald's former fiancée, who was the alleged victim when he was arrested last summer. Police investigating that case said the fiancée, who was pregnant at the time, showed visible injuries. Ultimately, no charges were filed in that case. The lawyer says, quote, "All I can tell you is that everybody you talk to knows Ray will tell you he's not a violent guy, and the accusation that he's getting violent with this woman, it's the second time that she's made such an allegation. The first time certainly did not pan out. I'm suspicious of it to begin with here. There's some issues about custody and about child support. All those things are currently in the process of being worked out. The bottom line is I think Chicago is moving too fast on this. They have absolutely no information at this point. They should be waiting to hear what the real facts are," end quote. In December, the San Jose Police Department began investigating McDonald for suspicion of sexual assault. That case remains open. Of note, Kyle Long, Chicago Bears offensive lineman, who was also briefly Ray McDonald's teammate, tweeted simply, "Good riddance." Now, Mike, before we get your thoughts, let me play what Louis Riddick said, our front office insider. He's going to join us live, as I mentioned, in about 20 minutes. But here's what he had to say yesterday on SportsCenter.
He's a guy who's still very valuable on the football field. But if you're a GM, if I'm a GM, look, you can't touch a guy like this. There's just no place for it. And, I mean, you saw how Kyle Long reacted to this, one of the best players on the Bears roster, who said, hey, he simply said good riddance on Twitter. Players are starting to wise up to this kind of stuff, too. Because really, it reflects poorly on everyone. And me as a former player who hasn't played in over 20 years almost. I mean, it's embarrassing to constantly have to talk about this stuff, about guys who make these kind of decisions. So you're right. Kyle Long, I commend you. Good riddance. Get your life together. But really, the NFL's just not going to have any place for you.
Again, Louis Riddick will join us live in 20 minutes with further thoughts. Mike, yours.
Well, I added to I saw Kyle Long's tweet, and I added to it, and my tweet was, if true, it's time for NFL. And when I say NFL, I mean players, I mean union, I mean everybody to just make a stand and say enough is enough. I said there are enough good players and good guys out there that, again, if this is true, players with this kind of history need to just not get any more chances. They be free to work anywhere else, but you know what? If he doesn't, we'll see where this pans out, and if nothing happens from it, he's certainly allowed to sign with any team. At some point, you wonder if a team will say enough is enough. As in the Greg Hardy situation, just about all the teams basically said he's off our board. We're not even thinking about bringing him in, and we know he's now with the Dallas Cowboys, and he's suspended at this point for 10 games, and we'll see where we go. So, and let's make sure we cover both sides of this. And as you mentioned, Louis Riddick will come on. Sarah Spain will come on. She's had, obviously, some pretty strong comments about this from Chicago as well. Mm-hmm. But the timelines you mentioned, August 31st, arrested, and this was with his fiancée who was then pregnant. November 10th of that year, they did not press charges. The fiancée declined, refused to participate in the investigation. So that went away. And remember, the 49ers never took him off the field. Never took him off the field for that, and we actually said we were all fine with that, correct? Because no charges had been filed, right? And then his fiancée refused to participate, so no charges ever came up.
And Jim Harbaugh basically said, the organization basically said, we believe him.
Right.
He told us that he didn't do anything wrong, and we believe him. That was the stance that they took, and we said, in the absence of some other proof, if the organization believes him, then, listen, this is all so extraordinarily complicated. But, those were the circumstances of last year. They feel very different looking back on them now.
November 10th, that happens then, and then December 13th, is the sexual assault, the alleged sexual assault, which is still an open case, by the way. So that was December 13th. Well, that was with a different woman, not his fiancée. December 17th, the 49ers release him. March 16th, so not too long ago, remember, because this case is still open, Ray McDonald filed a defamation lawsuit against the sexual assault accuser to try and push the case toward resolution. So he filed that. Still, that case is open. And then this happens, and the Bears release him. So a lot of it now, there are going to be those on the other side, Greeny, to play the devil's advocate, or the other side of innocent until proven guilty. In the August 31st situation, no charges were filed. In the sexual assault investigation, that case is still open, but he's filed defamation against her. And then now in this one, you hear his lawyer saying, let's wait till all the facts are in. So there are going to be those on that side that said, wait a minute, he hasn't been charged with anything, let alone found guilty of anything. Why shouldn't he keep getting chances? And there's the part of you from the law side that says, yeah, okay, you can see that side of it. But then there's the side of an NFL team that says, why am I hiring him? Why am I signing him? Okay, because he's putting himself in a situation. This is just what I would look at if I'm a GM. Okay, if I'm looking to sign someone like this. And again, you have to put in the domestic violence part to the football side of it, how whatever your thought process may be. But you're looking at a guy, okay, no charges were filed in the first one. Then there's charges of sexual assault. Now again, there's charges of domestic violence, which of course his lawyer says, let's wait till all the facts are out. And I get that. But isn't there a pattern of decision making? And the first question everybody would ask is, why are you he's at a place supposedly where he's renting the place for her and their child to stay. He doesn't live there, but he went there at 3:45 in the morning. And there are those that are going to say, well, if he's paying for the place, he can go there at 3:45. What's good about that decision? Forget even what even went on there, and we'll find out. But even to put yourself in that situation. And there are those that say he has every right to. And so we think that's a smart decision. And I'll continue to say, let's wait and find out. Was there domestic violence, and was it while she was holding their child? If so, there's no questions then. If so, there's nothing even to discuss here, okay? So let's take that side of it, that if there's domestic violence involved here, there's nothing to discuss. He's going to go under the new policy that's going on, and hopefully he'll be gone for a while. And then, quite honestly, when he serves whatever he serves and he comes back, then it's up to a team to hire him. And as far as I'm concerned, and I said it about Hardy, I'd make it real simple. We're not hiring him. Guys, don't even worry about scouting or don't even give me a report on him. We're not signing him. We'll find somebody else somewhere, somehow. I bet there's another football player out there that's pretty good. I'm just taking him off the board. So that's what you get to, because that's what the one side will say. You're innocent until proven guilty. No charges here. This case is still open. This case just happened. Oh, do we get a pattern here of the situation you're putting yourself in, let alone if anything's even happening or not? Why would you even deal with that? Now, I'm just talking from a team and a sports side of it. That would be my thought process. You're not now. If I never would have hired him in the first place. But now you're done. Just for your decision making alone, we're not even getting to the worst part of it, the cowardly act. If there actually was domestic violence or not, then that takes care of itself. You're going to deal with the law, hopefully. So I mean that's just my thought is, how do you continually put yourself in that situation? And then at some point, if you want to play in the NFL, at some point the NFL, the player or the guys who run that team, which is the owners, have to say down to their general manager, no, go find somebody else. We don't need him on our team. And many thought the Bears never should have signed him in the first place. Mm-hmm. But, we hear of owners. This happened in Cincinnati. They would take guys who had some issues and give them a second chance. And sometimes it would work, and sometimes it wouldn't work. But there just comes a point when you say, I'm done. Yes, he serves whatever he serves if he's guilty of something or if the league suspends him, and then he has a right to work wherever somebody will hire him. But that doesn't mean there's any obligation to sign him. And that's where I would be right now if I'm a team. He is now off every board. No matter just the decision-making you're making, done. Don't need it. Don't need it anymore. Goodbye. You can work. It's just like, you guys, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. You can work, but you're not working for my team. Go find somewhere else.
Roger Staubach said similar things over the weekend when he was asked on the radio about Greg Hardy being on the Cowboys. Staubach, the Hall of Fame quarterback, was on KTCK-AM, and he said, I don't have any tolerance toward domestic violence. If I was making a decision, it probably wouldn't have been good for the Cowboys. He went on to say, I wouldn't really enjoy being in the locker room with someone I knew was a domestic violence person. I would have really had a hard time with a teammate that you look at as a courageous, tough guy on the football field to abuse a woman in any shape or form. There's just no excuse for it. I thought it was interesting that Kyle Long, who is a very outspoken person in any number of ways, frequently, again, tweeted the words good riddance in reaction to this. You should hear from Sarah Spain. Again, she's going to be live with us later this morning as well. Columnist for ESPNW. She's based in Chicago. She works for ESPN 1000, and you see her all over the place. And she, I thought, had some very interesting stuff to say yesterday.
I don't want to say I'm not surprised, because, of course, you should always be surprised and disheartened when something like this happens. But I spoke to experts about dealing with domestic violence issues, and they say the number one thing that helps prevent recidivism, that really makes a difference in changing domestic abusers, is a willingness to take responsibility for what they've done and have a desire to change. And the problem with punishing for the sake of punishment is that while it may save the butts of the NFL or make the teams look good for being willing to suspend a guy for a couple games, if there's no actual treatment alongside that punishment, you're allowing the person to not really take accountability and not make any moves toward change. And selfishly, for an NFL team, you as much want that player to change as anybody watching who doesn't want to root for a guy who has these issues. And so Ray McDonald, by giving him a contract, by giving him millions of dollars to come back and play, and never making him acknowledge his own guilt in any of the previous incidents or undergo any treatment for them, is just facilitating a return to the NFL in a way that allows you to say, well, he was punished by the 49ers and we're giving him a second chance, but isn't taking accountability for the fact that he's likely to abuse someone again based on statistics if he never learns from it and acknowledges it. And so for me, watching the Bears make this decision and the statements that they made in terms of giving him a second chance, it was never satisfactory to me. It never felt like they did the due diligence and that they understood the process well enough to move forward with this guy and put him in an atmosphere that was going to prevent this from happening again.
Now, the one thing I'll say, now the new policy of domestic violence does have the counseling and those things involved in it. But the one thing, and I'll talk to Sarah about this. Listen, I'm on her side. I wouldn't have hired the guy. I wouldn't have signed him. And certainly now, if he goes through whatever he goes through and gets another chance, if you hire him, hey, so be it. That's up to you. But I wouldn't. But the one thing I will say is, when she said, he doesn't acknowledge it and he isn't made to go through any treatment, let's look at the situation from his side of it. He was accused. He was arrested in August 31st. No charges were filed. He said he didn't do anything wrong. No charges were filed. Now, you can not believe him if you want, but can you make someone like that go into counseling where no charges were filed? Then there was a sexual assault. I get it. It's a horrific thing. That case is still open, so he hasn't even been charged with that yet. So if you're the NFL, are you going to make him, or are you going to say, wait, you have to go into some kind of counseling? He's going to say, I didn't do anything. No charges were even brought against me. The one was no charges there and nothing filed. The one that's still pending, and I'm suing her. So from his side, I could see him saying, why should I have to go through counseling? And why, I know Sarah wants him to admit his wrongdoing, but he's saying he didn't do anything wrong. Now, that could be his own issue, and he could be, but so far, do we have anything that says he committed an act of domestic violence?
There seems no proof of it, and he continues to deny it, and his lawyer in this case was essentially denying it on his behalf yesterday.
So my point on that from his side of it is, you want you want the counseling, but can you force him to do it if he hasn't been found guilty of anything? But, listen, altogether, Sarah, I'm with you, and we'll chat about it. But from his side of it, and there's two sides to everything, I look at it from his side and said, gang, I haven't been charged with anything. I should absolutely have the right to play.
That's why this is a complex and not simple issue.
Mike and Mike.
Louis Riddick is a former NFL player and a former NFL front office man, and now our front office insider. He joins us here on Mike and Mike on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. And, Louis, we played some of your comments from SportsCenter yesterday in which it was easy to hear the disgust in your voice, I think, from the perspective of being a former player and someone who has been so connected to the league for such a long time, that these issues of domestic violence and the like continue to pop up and continue to be things that football people have to deal with and have to talk about. What I'd like to start with is, can you take us into a front office and take us through what the conversations you imagine are when an owner and the people making these decisions are trying to decide that it is in their best interest to give a player like Ray McDonald a shot on their team?
Well, Granny, really what it always comes down to is how good is the player relative to what is the risk of signing that player. That's really what it always comes down to. And more times than not, when you even get to this level of discussion, it's usually about a player who's got significant skill level, significant talent level that could help you in a way that would make a significant difference. That's why it even gets to ownership. Because most times, if it's a player that's not really worth your time discussing from a skill level standpoint, you won't even take it to ownership. You'll just make the decision on your own and pretty much say, look, we'll just move on from this guy and start considering someone else. When it gets to this point, it's pretty much, you pretty much have moved down the road to a point where you feel as though it's worth your while. Why else would Ryan Pace take it to ownership there at the Chicago Bears if he didn't feel that Ray McDonald could help him? Now, initially he was rebuffed, and they wound up changing their decision-making process and saying, okay, look, maybe we can give him another chance. But usually when it gets to this point and ownership is involved, you've made up your mind. You just kind of want the blessing of ownership. And really, that's why I said yesterday, accountability is going to have to start at the very top when you're talking about players like this, because you don't make these kind of decisions without the blessing of ownership, and they're going to be the ones who actually have to tell everyone, hey, look, this is the way it's going to be. Don't bring me guys like this who have this kind of significant background, this kind of significant pattern of behavior, because as the owner, as someone who really sets the course of what we want to be known as, I'm not dealing with this stuff anymore. Or ownership is going to say, As we've seen this year so far, like, look, if you look at the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm not criticizing Jerry Jones because he has the right to do whatever he wants. Or ownership has the right to say, and they will say, okay, I think we have a program and structure in place to be able to help someone like this. We can absorb the hit that we're going to take publicly as far as bringing in a guy with questionable background like this, and this is how we're going to move forward with it. But that's really where these kind of high-profile character cases are going to be able to, or rather, this is where they're going to need to be dealt with, is at the ownership level.
Do you think that it's going to start to change? Because while the Cowboys did sign Greg Hardy, there were just about every other team had him basically wouldn't even want to touch him, even though he's one of the best pass rushers in the league. Do we think the corner has been turned a little bit because I've always said it, and I know you know this as well, talent gives you a longer leash and another opportunity. But in this case, when we're starting to deal with domestic violence, do you think the tide is turning and more owners are going to say no more?
Absolutely, I do. I absolutely do. Although I will say this, though. When it's not you who are having to make a decision on a player, it's easy to kind of stand up and puff your chest out and say, hey, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sign that player. We're not going to do those kind of things. It's another thing to put your money where your mouth is and actually really turn down a player, especially when you're talking about a player who has significant talent. Because, again, I've had enough of these discussions, whether it be with scouts, directors, GMs, team presidents, whatever it is. At the end of the day, what drives the NFL, what drives winning in the NFL are players who are better than other ones. And people will trick themselves into believing that they're making a good decision despite a player having a putrid character background. They will trick themselves into believing they're making the right decision if that player is good enough. Now, there are a lot of teams right now who would have had nothing to do with Ray McDonald as soon as he was cut from the San Francisco 49ers. They would have had nothing to do with it. And there will be a lot of teams now who would say, hey, that's on the Chicago Bears, and we never would have put ourselves in that situation. But there are still some teams, there are still some scouts, there are still some GMs, directors, who always feel as though, hey, we can handle it, we can turn the player, we can make the player start making better decisions. And the reason why they're willing to go ahead and push that line out is especially in most cases because that player is good. When you're talking about players, Mike, and you know this, that aren't as talented, it's easy to go ahead and say, well, we're not going to bring that guy around based on his character background. But really the reason why you're saying it is, well, he's not good enough anyway. Not because you necessarily feel as though he doesn't have a place in the NFL based on his decision-making. It's strictly because you don't think he has enough value to you on the football field. And that's why we'll always have this conversation, because it's a talent-driven league, and talent trumps character more times than not. I know it. You know it. We all know it.
So take us into that management position now, Louis. Take us. You get that phone call. You're back in the front office. You get that phone call, and it's Ray McDonald's agent, and he is saying, "Listen, no charges filed in the first incident. The case still pending in the second incident, and this one we have no idea what's going on. Let's just say it goes down the road of like the first one." So he's been in a bad situation, but no charges ever filed. Louis, you got to bring this guy in. How are you answering that?
I'm saying, why do I have to bring him in? Because no charges were filed, because he's never really been convicted of anything. Look, we make character judgments, character assessments, and personnel all the time. The law does not rule us within our personnel departments as to who we want on our football team and who we don't. We can make whatever decision we want. We don't owe him anything. We don't owe him a chance to be here just because he wasn't convicted in a court of law of doing something wrong. We make character judgments, assessments all the time. That's what scouts are out on the road doing all the time, trying to gather information, trying to paint a picture of what a guy is and whether or not he is someone that fits into your organization. There are guys who've been taken off draft boards who've never been arrested, but because their pattern of behavior or people who they've associated with or their football character, the way that they act when they're in a building as far as being good teammates and having good study habits, being good people in society who make good decisions, you just take him off the board because you don't think it fits. Just because he hasn't been convicted doesn't mean I owe him anything. So if an agent tells me that, in this kind of situation, hey, maybe he was innocent as far as actually committing a crime in all three cases. Maybe he does prove to be innocent. But you cannot deny the fact that he keeps getting himself into situations where somehow he's being brought in, arrested initially, being questioned, and all this negative publicity is surrounding him, and then it surrounds your football team, and then it makes people call into question exactly what kind of organization are you guys trying to run, and what are you guys really standing for, and where is the line being drawn? And those are the kind of things, if you're trying to win football games and build a football team that your fan base is supposed to be proud of, you're not trying to answer those kind of questions all the time. And every team has a right to deny whoever they want, whatever player they want, the chance to play for them. And I heard you say this earlier. It's not about whether or not you've been convicted by the law, by a court of law. It's your right to bring in and hire whoever you want to hire based on what your standards are. So that's kind of my long answer to the agents. But I think most agents understand that. I know all scouts and GMs understand. But we're not governed by the court of law here. We can bring in whoever we want based on what kind of character profile we're looking for.
Great perspective from Louis Riddick. We'll see you in here later this week. Thank you, Louis.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
If you haven't heard Sarah Spain on this topic or many others, then you're missing one of the smartest voices in sports today. And Sarah joins us live from Chicago on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Sarah, we played some of your comments earlier, but for those in our audience who did not join us, can you, who were not with us then, I should say, can you share your thoughts from yesterday on why this news did not come as a particular surprise to you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I hate to say it didn't come as a surprise because it sounds flippant, and I don't mean it that way, but I mean what we've sort of seen in this situation of domestic violence is if you don't actually treat the problem, if you simply punish for the sake of PR, you're not necessarily doing anything to prevent it. You're just trying to figure out a way to make it okay to put a guy back in a lineup and convince people that he belongs there. And I talked with domestic violence experts for a piece that I wrote about Brandon Marshall as an example of someone who was diagnosed and treated, and since that time had actually shown a great amount of change and had been on the forefront of speaking about mental illness and his issues, and how perhaps for Ray Rice, getting the proper treatment and understanding what he did, acknowledging what he did, getting treated for it, and then would have the ability to move on and join a team and hopefully put the incident behind him. Unfortunately, the NFL's decision to punish merely for the sake of punishment doesn't address the root cause of why someone might have domestic violence issues. And so rehabilitative punishment is really the answer. And with the Ray Rice incident, what we saw was that they gave him anger management. And most domestic violence experts will tell you that that's usually not about anger, it's about control. And so they need very specific kind of treatment. And what you said about the NFL not really understanding domestic violence, and that's why they shouldn't be involved, half of that is true. They don't really seem to understand it, but they need to be involved because you can't just let the flawed legal system decide. Especially in a case like this, you see that you're putting a guy in an incredibly influential position where he represents a team and a league to a lot of people, and he's an unsavory character, and he obviously has issues. At the very least, he's a guy that's somehow been charged or had the police called on him 4 times since August. You know?
Yeah, no, listen, I agree with a lot you're saying, and as far as the NFL, I know the new policy dictates more as far as counseling and measures, but, I guess I would ask, too, is any company, is Google, Apple, are they experts in domestic violence? I mean, I think everybody learns along the way of how to deal with domestic violence, and hopefully the NFL, which has made bad mistakes, hopefully they have learned as well. Let me ask you this, because, listen, we're in 100% agreement, but let me play devil's advocate to you of saying, listen, how do you sign this guy and not have him go through counseling and this? Listen, in the Kevin Hardy, we had the bench conviction. We all saw Greg Hardy, we saw that. Ray Rice, we certainly saw the video to that situation and know what he did. But, Sarah, in this situation, Ray McDonald or his agent can say, wait a minute, No charges were ever brought against me. I did nothing wrong. The sexual assault, that case is still open, and I'm suing her for defamation of character. So why, I would say they're going to ask this of you, Sarah. They're going to say, Sarah, why should I have to go through any kind of program when I did nothing wrong? No charges were ever filed against me at all. Why are you making me go through classes when as far as they're concerned, they did nothing wrong?
Yeah, I completely understand that point of view, and I understand people saying, how do you assign guilt to someone that hasn't been found guilty in a court of law? But as you said, the NFL doesn't need to prove, because they're not taking away someone's liberty, right? If they don't sign him, they're not denying him a right to live or a right to freedom. They're simply saying, we don't want to involve you with our team. And with him, like I said, at the very least, this is a guy who has had the police called twice to his house for domestic violence issues. One time, the report said there were visible bruises to a pregnant fiance. The third time is a sexual assault case. So there are people who make it through all of life without ever having an issue. And this guy has the police called on him 3 times in a span of a few months. It's not to say that you can find him guilty because of that and put him in jail, but you can say, we're a little worried about the decision-making that you're showing us. We're a little worried about adding you to our team, particularly a new regime trying to escape from a really bad reputation they acquired last year of having a bad locker room and that resulting in their bad record. So in order for us to put our, neck out on the line for you, give you $1 million and have you join our team, we ask that you undergo this treatment. If you are innocent, the best it can do is maybe help inform why you would be in a relationship that would result in the police being called to your house, right? I mean, at the very least, this is a volatile enough relationship that they had the police called to their house twice. So what's the worst that can happen? You'd think you'd still benefit from a discussion about what that dynamic is.
Yeah, and there are people, I mean, to take it.
That's the best, that's the best you can say is, if you want this opportunity, just do this.
No, you're right. Listen, and every team would have the right to say that, but because that's what's going to happen. When Ray however this ends up, when Ray McDonald has the ability to be signed again, that's the argument his agent is going to have, the one I just gave you, and that's a great answer. A team can say, listen, these are going to be our guidelines. You have to get some help on this because of the pattern of decision-making you've been making.
Mike and Sarah Spain from ESPN 1000 and ESPNW. Sarah, during the break leading right up to having you on, I just read for the first time Jane McManus's column on ESPNW, and she brings up another interesting point. In order for the Bears to have brought in Ray McDonald when they did, that clearly was not a decision that was made by the football people alone. That's something that ownership clearly has to sign off on. And George McCaskey, representing the McCaskey family that owns the Chicago Bears, was very out front publicly in so doing. And said, among other things, I was impressed with how sincere he was, how motivated he is. He wants his career to continue. He loves football, words that sound very different when you read them now. He went on to, I just want to read you a paragraph from her piece. Jane writes, what McCaskey, and again remember he is a member of the NFL's revamped Code of Conduct Committee, failed to do during a laughably one-sided due diligence process was to talk to anyone who was an attorney for one of the alleged victims in the domestic violence or sexual assault cases in the months before, or, goodness forbid, she writes, one of the women herself, if she wanted to speak with the team. And George McCaskey said, quote, an alleged victim, I think, much like anybody else who has a bias in this situation, there's a certain amount of discounting in what they have to say. That doesn't sound so good when you read it over again now. So I guess my question to you, Sarah, is how bad does this look for the ownership of the Bears?
Well, it didn't sound good then, and a lot of people brought it up. You want to talk about bias? The people that you mentioned speaking to for McDonald's behalf was Vic Fangio, McDonald's parents, and himself. And you were impressed that he bought his own plane ticket to Chicago. To me, that smacks of the guy who's desperate to join a team, not to any indication of his character or his innocence. I'm not impressed by him buying his own plane ticket. And yeah, when he said the bias line, it just reinforced the terrible way in which we assume the guilt of the victim instead of the guilt of the accused. You need to be able to understand the inherent worth of speaking to the police or a lawyer or anybody on that side of things. And when they said that they hadn't, And that can be complicated. The victim has to be willing to speak. But, you have to make that effort. And we saw the same thing with the Buccaneers talking to 75 people on behalf of Jameis Winston and never speaking to anyone from the side of the accused. It's an issue I think that will become more prevalent as we talk about these things, is whether they're really doing their due diligence, whether they're really vetting someone. And I think it's a terrible move for the Bears because, look, it's 62 days after they signed him that this happened. We didn't even get to OTAs. And for Ryan Pace to have convinced George McCaskey, who originally said he did not want to sign him, for Ryan Pace to come in as a new GM and say, look, I want to put my neck out on the line for this guy. I want you to put your neck out on the line for me, to have this happen is a terrible way to start the regime. And particularly because there were a lot of discussions about the Bears locker room last year and how it might have contributed, a lack of leadership and what was going on in there and whether that contributed to them falling so far so fast. And this wasn't the answer. He wasn't going to get them to the playoffs, so it wasn't worth the risk in the first place. And now, 62 days later, before the season even starts, you've already proven to have made a terrible decision. Monetarily doesn't hurt them. PR it does. Because the Bears are not a team that has really taken a lot of chances with character guys in the past.
Mike and Mike.
ESPN Radio, bringing you directly to the biggest events in sports.
Center field, well hit, Hunter back, out of here!
From opening day of baseball,
Throw to the plate, safe at the plate!
right through the World Series.
For the third time in 5 seasons, the San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
Whether it's LeBron, Chris Paul, or Kevin Durant, when the NBA tips off, ESPN Radio is right there when a champion is crowned.
We have a new world champion. The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
And when the magic of bowl season arrives, ESPN Radio is your home for the new college football playoff.
The college football playoff first national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
The biggest events in sports can be found right here on ESPN Radio.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Well, stuff flying in fast and furious. I was just reading a couple of quotes here that I thought were interesting. We are presented, by the way, by Progressive Insurance. Our guests like Jeff Van Gundy in a few minutes on the Subway Fresh Steak Hotline. I can't get my chair to fall. So one of these chairs, we have chairs here that when I stand up, it kind of props itself up.
Yeah, kind of raises up.
Usually when I sit down,
it settles in.
And it doesn't do it. And so now I'm actually taller than you are, which I know our audience recognizes as ridiculous.
Right.
But I'm not doing it on purpose. I can't get it to.
You can't.
There it goes. There it
goes.
It just went. Right, I just want to read you this because I just saw it. I had seen in the game last night that the Padres intentionally walked Albert Pujols. Intentionally walked Mike Trout to pitch to Albert Pujols.
Yes.
And Pujols beat him with a base hit. And here are the quotes from Pujols afterwards. Pujols would beat the Padres with a walk-off single after San Diego elected to walk Mike Trout to pitch to him. Quote, "Just part of the game, man," Pujols said, his emotions in check. "Exciting moment. It's not rocket science. If I was the manager, I would have done the same thing. It doesn't make any sense to let the best player on the team beat you." End quote. I get it. He's saying the right thing and everything else. Do you think down deep somewhere inside Albert Pujols is seething at someone being intentionally walked
to get to him? Why wouldn't? Of course, you're a human being. I mean, and we know what he was. He certainly isn't what he was.
That's what I mean. I mean, for others, you get it. But when you're Albert Pujols, for crying out loud.
Completely, absolutely. He said all the right things, but there's no doubt that the satisfaction he got by getting that base hit. For the walk-off there, in wanting to pitch to him, and that's what they got. Yeah, he wouldn't be human if he didn't have that thought, the player that he was. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a strange dynamic. It's one that is somewhat unique to baseball. I guess in its own kind of silly way, it's sort of akin to the hack-a-shack, which is we're going to intentionally give you a chance to beat us and try and prey on your weakness. Now, in this case, you're not really preying on Pujols' weakness as much as you're just basically saying someone else has
someone else
is
the best player, or basically one in the team picture for the best player in the game, and we don't want to throw to him. Whereas in basketball, you're horrific at this particular act, so we're going to make you do this act.
It's just funny. Albert Pujols has been intentionally walked more times than any active player in Major League Baseball. 287 times in his career, Albert Pujols has been intentionally walked. So just the optics of having anyone, Mike Trout, who's obviously a brilliant player. He's probably the best player in the game. Right now, Bryce Harper's probably the best player in the game, but whatever. You know what I mean? The optics of having anyone intentionally walked to pitch to you, I don't know this stat. How many times has Babe Ruth intentionally walked to pitch to Lou Gehrig? This isn't that exactly, but you know what I'm saying. No, you got Pujols sitting there with a bat in his hand saying, so it's me you want to pitch to. It seems
odd, but in that case, it seemed right.
All right, we're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. That just came across those quotes in our previous break there, and I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to share it with you. Now back to Golic's favorite player, Matthew Dellavedova. Golic's Cleveland home roots showing like crazy. And you're calling him Matt now. I believe his closer friends call him Deli, so I'm not surprised you're not doing that.
Never met the man in my life.
We get you a jersey?
Never met the man in my life, but I tell you what, if I saw him on, I'd buy him a drink. I like his style.
Yeah, okay. And if he played on any other team, you would be sitting there not liking his style.
Exactly right. Yes. And you know what I mean? That is a compliment. That term is meant as a compliment. You love him as a teammate, you hate him as an opponent, because you know what? That means he's getting to you.
And so let me make 100% clear my point, because now the entire state of Ohio is yelling at me on Twitter. I'm not saying Dellavedova should have been thrown out of that game. Somehow, I say what I said, and people respond, Greeny, why would Dellavedova get thrown out? I'm not saying Dellavedova should have gotten thrown out. I'm saying based on Dellavedova's reputation and some of the things that we've seen, Al Horford should have gotten the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, stop it.
He should have gotten the benefit of the doubt.
It doesn't matter.
They could have made that a flagrant one.
You gotta be kidding me. It doesn't matter what Dellavedova did. It doesn't matter what his reputation is. It's a matter of what Horford did. I mean, I can't believe no wonder people called you a moron for this.
Do you think he should have been thrown out?
I thought it was going to be a flagrant one, but I have no problem with it that they threw him out. When you look at what he did right there in front of the official, he wound up and came down with his elbow. I mean, I would imagine the refs at that point thought to themselves, do I think they wanted it? Because they met for a while.
Yep.
Did they not?
Yes.
And I don't think they want to throw anybody out. But
I think they could have not.
I don't think they could say, if we let that go, what could this turn into? Because this is the deal, Greeny. If that gets a flagrant one and nothing else, now players are saying, okay, I can get away with that. So now when I spin and I pop my elbow real hard and catch someone in the neck, you can't give me any more than a flagrant one, because that's what you gave him. The refs had to do it to keep control, to say, we're not letting this go. I don't think they wanted to, but I think watching it enough, there's no way they couldn't do that without a play. Because, listen, the people who pick up on it the most are the players. Now that kind of sets the tone for what you can get away with. And the rest didn't want the players to think they could get away with something like that. So I have zero problem with them tossing them and doing what they did.
That said, Rick Bucher was on in this hour yesterday, actually, a well-known basketball guy, and he brought up a good point when we were talking about this exactly. And especially with the issue of Dellavedova, he gets under your skin and you really have almost no way of retaliating. He said, blame the league. In the old days, this would have been handled differently.
A lot of this would have been policed within the game, and it would have been taken care of, and nobody would be thrown out. Now we've put it all in the hands of the officials because we're so fearful, or the NBA is so fearful that something untoward is going to happen and it's going to make the game look bad. But now you don't have any of that policing within the game. Now you put all of it in the hands of the officials, and they have to make calls to settle this. And for me, it results in more miscarriage of justice.
Yeah, listen, policing the game has been part of every sport. Every sport has their way of policing on the field. And we know what it was in basketball. How many guys ended up on their butts driving the lane? How many hard screens are set on someone with a little extra oomph to it that may result in a foul but not getting tossed out of the game, that jolts someone's being, and tries to
and
send
it's a way
message.
of letting him know, look,
That's
we see what's
exactly
going
right.
on out here, and let's take it easy.
Now you're letting the refs handle it all, and you can't dole out anything.
The place where that is handled more than any other is hockey. Anytime you have a conversation about the National Hockey League and the possibility of banning fighting, the response you always get from people who really know the sport is that would be the biggest mistake you could make, because that's the way the game polices itself. And if you take the fighting out of hockey, what you would wind up with is a lot dirtier stuff going on the ice. You'd wind up with guys, sticks and faces and all kinds of stuff that you do not want, because there was just a code of conduct, and if anyone steps a little bit out of line, they pay a price, and everyone sort of understands the box you have to stay in. And it makes perfect sense. Perfect sense to me. As one who does not believe that fighting in hockey is, in the big picture, good for the sport's image and it's trying to gain greater popularity, I fully understand that argument, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
In this case, the NBA, for a variety of reasons, has legislated that out of the league.
They have. And forgetting even policing against a player like that, just the game itself. You're telling me, look at all the free throws Harden gets.
Yeah.
You telling me back in the day a little bit how sore he would be after a game? He drives the lane. And listen, he ends up on his butt a few times, but you know how it was? If a guy scores that much on the inside and gets to the free throw line, he's going to end up bloody. You don't want it that far, and that's why it was taken out of the game. But that part of it was lost. It's kind of the over-the-middle shot in football. You want to deter a guy from trying to catch the ball because he's going to get laid out over the middle. Well, that's been taken out of the game because of the head, and I get it to a point of doing it. But sometimes it goes too far.
All right, let's get Van Gundy up. I want to get him in on this conversation. We'll talk to Jeff about that and a whole lot more, obviously, with the playoffs rolling along. Jeff Van Gundy will join us live on Mike and Mike right after this word from Castrol. Mike, we just learned about a new motor oil. It's Castrol GTX Magnatech. It's made with intelligent molecules that cling to protect your engine.
Yep, you hop in your car to run out for milk or to get the dry cleaning or some dog food. It all adds up, and up to 75% of engine wear occurs during the first 20 minutes of driving. Since most motor oils need that much time to warm up, your motor oil isn't ever fully activated, so your engine is experiencing wear. Castrol GTX Magnatech's intelligent molecules cling to critical engine parts even when the engine is off. Try new Castrol GTX Magnatech today by visiting AutoZone or Quick Lube Center.
We're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and let's welcome him into our house. Jeff Van Gundy doing the Western Conference Finals and then the NBA Finals for us on ESPN and then ABC. He joins us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline from Houston. Good morning, Jeff.
How are you?
Good. We are great. We're actually talking right now a little bit about the situation with Dellavedova and Horford the other night, and Rick Bucher made a really good point on our show yesterday about how there was a time in the NBA, frankly up until fairly recently, where a lot of stuff would be policed on the court, and you might not have a little bit of these pent-up issues with a player like Dellavedova who plays right up to the line and maybe sometimes instigates issues. So I'd be curious to get your perspective on that, on sort of the way the game used to police itself, doesn't anymore, and your perspective on Dellavedova as a player and the impact he's having in the series.
Well, first, Mike and Mike, I want to give my sincere thoughts to all the people in Houston that have been impacted by this incredible flooding that's taken place over the last 24 hours here. The destruction is incredible. To Dellavedova, I think, listen, every play is different. And the Taj Gibson one, I was incredulous that Taj Gibson was thrown out on review, and Dellavedova got nothing. The Kyle Korver one, to me, is totally different. That's a hustle play that you want all your players to make. And then the other night, I'm sort of right down the middle. I don't think Al Horford should have been ejected. And I agree with Rick in this case that when you take it all out of the player's hands, there is going to be some frustration because the person, and I'm not saying Dellavedova in particular, but just in general, the instigators always get protected by the officials. And oftentimes, what starts something
leads to the next aggressive act. And if the first one isn't caught and punished either by foul, then the second person gets caught and pays a heavy burden, and the instigator gets off scot-free. And I don't like that part of it. Like, to me, Al Horford had a natural reaction. It was not only the person, but the type of play that happened. And we expect our guys to have incredible self-control in the most emotional state that you could be in, the height of athletic competition. And, you know, to me, to eject somebody from a playoff game, it has to be egregious, and I thought that fell short.
You know, I'll say on the other side of that, Jeff, that LeBron gets knocked around about every way you can, and he walks away. How many times did Shaq get held and hit and shoved, and, you know, he walks away? I mean, you have to have the ability to do that. So in that –
But Mike, Shaq, LeBron doesn't get hit, like, at the knees or that hard. Like, he gets fouled, but he doesn't get, like – taken out. And Shaq, Shaq, he was controlled for the most part, but he was just crazy enough that he went after Brad Miller once and, you know, swung so hard it could have killed somebody. Because those big guys, like, they have long been officiated at a different standard where so much more, they have to take so much more physical pounding, and the force of the fouls is so much different than the little guys. The little guys, when they get hit, they fall over, and we protect them as a league. We do nothing to protect the big guys. And listen, Dwight Howard last night, to me, he didn't handle it right, but this is a decade or so of him, like, taking shots above the shoulders as well, with hard hits where the league has not protected the big guys. And I'm not saying he was right in what he did, but I understand these big guys who get frustrated.
So in a game like tonight, when for the Cavs and the Hawks, so as a coach, when you go into the game and you know Dellavedova is that instigator, that hustle, that guy's going to dive into anything and he's going to, you know, rub you the wrong way, how much do you as the opposing coach talk to your team about, guys, you know what he's going to do. You know he's going to agitate you, but you can't react to it.
Yeah, I am. Listen, Dellavedova is a good player. He came from being, I believe, undrafted to starting in the Eastern Conference Finals and having a major impact. And when you're right at the borderline of the level of talent, you know, to stick in a league, you have to go the extra mile, and he does. He plays exceptionally hard. He's tough. I heard LeBron mention he was a rugby player. You know, so this guy is, but you can't get carried away with that. You got to play basketball, and you have to play through it. And I think, you know, Al Horford, listen, his ejection and his momentary loss of control, you could easily place that as one of the main factors why they didn't win Game 3. And you got to be able to play through it. Now, that's not to say, hey, when he's picking up full court, you don't have a guy like Pero Antic come up and set a hard screen, you know, and let him know, you know, we're here too. So you can get back at guys legally, but you have to know when to do it, how to do it, and what part of the game to do it in.
Mike and Mike, Jeff and Gundy with us again. ESPN crew doing the Western Conference Finals. So last night they're in Houston, and just curious, when you were watching, sitting right there, when Steph Curry's feet were up in the air and his head was down below, what thoughts went through your mind as you were watching a guy who was the league MVP this year tumble completely out of control to the ground?
Initially, I thought, you know, this is a possible major injury. And then when he was able to get up, I thought you're looking at a concussion. And, you know, not only did I think he wouldn't come back this game, I didn't think he might be back for a few games. I haven't seen as bad a fall like that I can remember in a long, long time. totally defenseless, way up, and definitely, came down, shoulder, neck, head simultaneously. So I was absolutely shocked that he was able to get back into that game and play well.
And on that note, listen, we talk to head coaches all the time, and they say if the doctor says a guy can go back in, we have no problem putting it back in. So the thoughts last night on him going back in the game, when he came in, it was a 9-point game as opposed to the 25-point lead Houston had earlier in that game.
Yeah, tough calls. Tough calls for everybody involved. From the doctor to, the coaches. And unless you're there and getting all the information, the one thing you do know is, the player. If you're everybody involved from ownership on down, through management, doctors, coaches, and you have to be able to rely on him to tell you the truth. And if the doctor says it's fine and the owner says it's fine and the GM says it's fine and the player says it's fine, I think as a coach you have to be able to trust that it is fine. But those are hard decisions, particularly in the heat of competition.
And then finally, Jeff, because you brought it up, and I just hadn't put the two together in my head, but I think it is appropriate to mention in Houston, where you guys did the game last night, they had 9.5 inches of rain that fell in the last 24 hours. I saw where the fans were asked not to leave the building for quite some time after the game because of the conditions. Can you just describe what it was like there, what it was like getting out of the arena and getting back to the hotel?
Well, I live here, Mike, so I came home, but I waited for a bit. I barely made it. I don't have to take the highway for too long. And actually the highway was much better than the streets. There was at least 8 to 10 inches of water, it seemed like, on my street. And so I barely made it. But the number of people that are stranded on the roadway still, from last night, there's over in one area very close to here and very close to the arena, the overpass is set at 13 feet, and the water is up to that right now with cars totally submerged, tractor-trailer trucks strewn all over the place. The destruction is massive, and my hearts just go out to the people, who are facing, a lot of destruction. It's really bad.
The images on television and online have been scary to watch indeed. So appropriate to mention certainly our thoughts with everybody there as well. Jeff, thanks a million. We'll check in again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Take care, guys.
That's Jeff Van Gundy with us. I forgot that he lived in Houston. Obviously, he was there. I knew that he had maintained a home there. I guess I've always, up until just a second, I thought he had come back and still lived in the Westchester area. One way or another, it is home there. And yes, I had seen those pictures. We all saw that the fans were asked not to leave, and I believe until close to 2 hours after the game was over last night, and stayed in the arena and celebrated the win. And then you wake up this morning and you see a lot of the video.
Just the devastation.
Frightening stuff.
Very tough,
Absolutely.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Greeny, good news. You're in the family, bud.
What? The family?
Yeah, my sausage family. You know, the friends, neighbors, and radio co-hosts I invite over whenever I cook juicy Johnsonville brats.
Oh, that's very sweet. I'm part of your family now?
Yeah, you are. Well, my sausage family. It's kind of like family. Means I can ask you for favors or money or, if I need a place to crash or someone to wash my car or something like that.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you're entitled to any inheritance or the use of my pool or my car or crashing at my place. I mean, that's strictly for real family,
I'm starting to wonder what's in this for me.
Well, the juicy brats for starters. And, you get to wash my car whenever you want or lend me money, no questions asked, or you get to have me crash on your couch for free.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's a pretty good deal.
Great. Welcome to the sausage family, bud.
At Johnsonville, we don't make sausage. We make family and sausage.